Chainsaw sitze.
Schönen guten Tag, die Herrschaften.
So, der Stream läuft auch.
So, wir haben was Kleines vorbereitet im Namen dieses ersten Treffens. Ich hoffe doch, dass jeder bereit ist, ein wenig Holdfast zu spielen.
Ach, selbstverständlich. Das kann ja heute nicht.
Was soll das denn heißen?
Ach, nichts.
Masamune kam gestern schon in den Genuss davon.
Das sieht auf jeden Fall sehr schön aus, muss ich sagen.
Wir haben uns vorbereitet. Soll ja auch was hermachen. Ich habe eben alles gepostet.
User was moved to your channel.
So, guten Abend. Die Herren, ich bin auch da.
Okay.
Fehlt jetzt... Das musst du jetzt nicht... Oh mein Gott.
Ne, das sollte er machen. Dings hat darum gebeten.
Ja, ich bin Zeuge. Er hat's
User was
gesagt.
moved to your channel.
Jetzt liegt da die Leiche rum.
Fehlt noch... Oh Gott, jetzt kommen noch viele Leute. Okay, von wem fehlt denn...
Leiche.
Fehlt denn noch was?
Ach, das
Oder mir fehlt noch einer, der müsste eigentlich gleich
Hat jemand eine Schaufel?
Wir müssen da nicht sein.
Also ist die Nummer 3 ist vollständig.
Da, die hat Maß auch.
Das vierte hier ist auch vollständig.
Liegt ein Opfer.
Nelson, schön, dass du schon da bist. Du darfst dich gerne in die... Von mir aus ist mir egal, welche Reihe. Weil ich einfach...
Passwort war ebenfalls vollständig.
Nochmal was?
Passwort
Ja, das Passwort ist auch Preußen, mit Doppel-S und alles klein geschrieben.
Laden, kann man hier schon nachjoinen?
Ja, man kann mir nachschauen.
Vielleicht sollte auch das Passwort nicht laut genannt werden. Wir sind gerade live.
Das Passwort? Na, alles gut. Ich bezweifle, dass jemand missbauen wird. Und ich gehe auch mal nur davon aus, dass Regimentsmitglieder der anderen zuschauen werden. Würde ich jetzt mal schätzen. Ich weiß es natürlich nicht.
Ach, so sollte es sein.
Könnte es sein. Apropos, da wir gerade davon reden, einer meiner Kameraden wünscht den Leben. Der jemand so freundlich und wird mit dem Danke.
Bitte.
Könnten
Wie gesagt,
eventuell,
die Offiziere können sich... Oh Gott, das waren übrigens Vertreter mit. Jetzt
könnten eventuell nur die Oberst-Offiziere nehmen. Das wäre
das
sehr
können
cool.
wir so einrichten, ja.
Ja, weil es kein Platz mehr, das wäre echt mega sweet. Vielen Dank.
Linie, beziehungsweise die könnten sich mal bitte hier rechts, beziehungsweise hinter mir, ich bin da, mal mit der Lampe aufstellen.
Bitte
Einfach direkt einfach Linie vor mir. Ich denke, das ist...
Können wir bitte mal wiederholen,
Ja, wir sollen ja
was
nicht
die
verlieren.
Vertreter nehmen sollen?
Ja, noch nur allein, oder?
Ja, also, Oberste können von mir aus Offiziere nehmen. Ich würde sagen, alles darunter bleibt einfach bei der guten alten Infanterie.
Alles klar.
Ich mach nix.
Mein Offizier.
Und Offiziere können sich mal hinter Fnord und Snow, die stehen hier vorne, einfach einreihen.
Bitte wiederholen, Herr Hauptmann.
Bitte und Garde für Sie.
Oh, natürlich.
Der Militärmitglied bei mir.
User disconnected from your channel.
Ist jetzt noch irgendein Offizier, also ein Unteroffizier, ein Offizier in-game? Weil es immer noch 10 von 10.
Ja, glaub nicht, oder?
Es
Ja, dann
wäre
müsst
so
ihr
nett.
umdisponieren. Ist jetzt ein wenig unpassend, denke ich.
Könnt auch Franzose übernehmen, die haben sowieso schon...
Ja, das könnt ihr auch machen. Damit es halt passt, ne? Wir sind ja ein bisschen viel heute.
Ja.
Okay.
Also, ich habe jetzt meinen Platz an Kopie bei dem abgegeben.
So, alle da oder fehlt noch jemand?
Ich bin auch gleich da. Müsste mal hier herein. Dankeschön.
So, alle vollzählig oder fühlt.
Da.
Gehen wir los?
Denke.
Dürfen sich jeder, der nicht Oberst ist, natürlich dementsprechend anschließen. Der muss jetzt nicht da hinten stehen bleiben.
Denkst du?
Echt? Natürlich. Nein. Wenn ihr da in einer schönen Linie lauft.
User joined your channel.
Warum müssen wir Gänse im Arsch laufen? Man hätte so schöne Doppellinie machen können.
Man schweigt und genießt.
Wie heißt das?
User joined your channel.
Die Infanterie kann sich am besten gleich links vom Tor aufstellen, an der Wand. Ja, genau. Was das
Habe
nicht?
ich noch was verpasst?
So?
Ich weiß es nicht. Ich bin doch richtig hier zum Treffen, ne?
Ja, natürlich.
Das ist wunderbar.
Mit
Seid ihr
Chipman
noch
kommen Sie
irgendein
bitte auch
Server
mal nach
oder was?
rechts.
Seid ihr
Komm mal
noch
bitte.
irgendein Server oder was?
Ja, wir sind auf unserem Server. Ich weiß nicht, die Daten stehen im Channel, in der Channel-Beschreibung. Ich hoffe, es hat gefallen. Mühe gegeben. Musste ja auch mal sein. Ich begrüße ich erstmal alle zum offiziellen ersten Treffen der deutschen Community bzw. der aktiven deutschen Regimenter. Mit Unterstützung von Refleax, der uns heute ja auch beiwohnt, Fragen zu beantworten, die uns auf der Seele brennen.
Ich komme mit einer rauchen.
Da ich schon von einigen gehört habe, dass heute leider nicht sehr viel Zeit ist, würde ich sagen, dass wir diesen Punkt als erstes abhaken, weil auch Reflex begrenzt Zeit hat.
Hallo.
Hallo.
Am besten einfach ein Plus in Chat, fangen wir damit an und dann arbeiten wir nach und nach anstehende Fragen ab. Keiner hat Fragen. Nicht zum Spiel.
Meinst du im Teamspeaken Plus oder?
Ja, genau, einfach ein Teamspeak Plus machen. Oder halt im
Ja,
Spiel.
meine
Ist
Spieler
eigentlich
sind gerade
egal.
auf dem Moment.
Aber halt, wenn Fragen sind,
Ich habe keine Rechte, um in den Teamspeak zu schreiben.
Was ist das denn? Okay, Moment.
Das finde ich gut. Ich sage, wir brauchen Rechte.
Richtig gut.
Ja, dann macht's im Spiel.
Oberst Anton hat eine Frage. Am besten in den Old Chat schreiben, wir haben ja ein paar Franzosen dabei.
Soll ich die jetzt einfach so stellen, oder?
Du willst, ja, kannst du machen.
Ja, also allgemein, ich habe jetzt noch nicht so viel mitbekommen, gibt es schon so offizielle Regeln für Line Battles? Oder übernehmen wir die einfach von früher von NW oder etwas in die Richtung?
Ich muss ja da bitten, dass die Leute, die da gerade am rumknistern sind, sich...
Ich glaube, wir sollen die Fragen noch angestellt.
Ich glaube, das ist eine Sache der Community, die das geregelt wird. Außerdem, ich weiß, so viel deutsche Line-Belts gibt es ja momentan noch nicht. Ich
Darf
denke,
ich?
dass...
Wir vom Zweiten haben ja ein Sonntagsline-Battle. Und wir haben uns eigentlich einfach nur die Regeln von damals mitgenommen.
Okay.
Also quasi das übliche, kein Schießen im Charge, Officer Aiming etc. pp. Das, was man halt so kennt. Ich denke, das werden die meisten so machen, oder?
Ja, nicht schon. Zumindest die es noch kennen. Übrigens kann jetzt auch hier Textnachrichten geschrieben werden. Und da ist noch jemand.
User was moved to your channel.
Moin.
Zack. Hatte ich hier noch Fragen? Vom Nivek. Der ist hier nicht da. Toll. Ja, frage ihn gleich. Laris hat eine Frage.
Ja, und zwar zum Generellen, was unser Oberst ist leider nicht anwesend, weil der nicht kann, der ist arbeitstechnisch verhindert. Und er hatte uns so ein paar Sachen aufgeschrieben, die wir doch bitte mal nachhören sollten. Gerade bezüglich, doch, wir haben jetzt einen von den Entwicklern da, ne? Einfach nur mal für mich.
Yes.
Gut. Und zwar zum einen war die Sache, da wir eben dieses relativ große Line-Battle haben sonntags und auch des Öfteren nur mal restarten. Ein paar von den Leuten hier kennen das ja. Ein paar sind ja auch dabei. Das Problem, was wir haben, zum Beispiel, wenn wir die Map restarten, müssen wir jedes Mal die komplette Map neu laden. Das gab es bei NW damals, um es jetzt einfach nur in den Vergleich zu ziehen, weil das ist, was die meisten ja hier früher gespielt haben. Gab es das im Prinzip, dass man einfach die Map neu geladen hat. Wird es das wieder geben? Wird es das nicht geben? Ist das in Planung oder wie dürfen wir uns das vorstellen?
Reflex?
Yes, hello.
We have a question. Is it planned that you can just reload the map instead of restarting it all over again?
Yes, so we do plan on having functionality for multiple rounds in the game. We know it would be quite efficient, especially for public line battles or just competitive line battles, and that's something we definitely want to include in the game, including functionality for players to also define their own class limits from the game, from the server config file, apologies, as well as change the side of where either faction spawns, so not always either French or British spawn at the same location, right?
Okay. Darf ich die nächste Frage direkt in Englisch stellen?
Ja, bitte.
Okay, so I got in the next question. How's about a map editor? So we got the problem that we want for the trainings that we made. Our own training map, if you want to say it like this. How's about that? Is it possible to get that, or is it planned or not, or how about this?
Yes, a map editor is definitely planned. To be honest, we've been eyeing out the idea of doing that relatively soon, but we'll have to check since we're also considering doing a graphical upgrade to the game. And before we do any map editor, it would be good to kind of have a final stabilized version of how the game looks, just due to some technicality. But it's definitely something we want to include. A map editor is, yes, it's going to be part of the main features before we fully release the game as a 1.0 version.
Okay, thanks. And we got some one more question. Yeah, about everything that, or about the thing that everyone here wants, we think. How's about the faction poison? When will you, or can you say when you will implement it in the game?
Unfortunately, I cannot provide a date right now, but we've been showing progress of it already, and we also have one of the uniforms we haven't showed to a whole lot of people yet, which is done. What I can tell you is that the voice acting work is done. We just need to edit things. And when it comes to the uniforms, there's still a couple of ones to be made, but there's been plenty of progress done in that area as well. Jackson, who's currently working on those uniforms, will be returning by the end of this week, and he'll continue his work. And that's something we definitely look forward to including in the game.
Okay. Yeah, one more thing, then I'm done. It's about the artillery and cavalry. So will there be, or how about when there will be movable, so yeah, movable artillery, or will there be only the artillery as now? And how's about the cavalry?
So there will be movable artillery. It's part of our roadmap. We're still figuring out if we should bring movable artillery after we introduce cavalry or before.
Yeah.
However, once we do cavalry, then it will definitely broaden our options in terms of carriages, right, and carrying artillery around the battlefield. Obviously, since I just mentioned the previous stuff, cavalry, yes, it is planned in the game. We do plan on including multiple classes as well when we introduce cavalry, and that will be applicable for all the factions. However, there's still some things we would like to iron out with melee combat before we can proceed with before we can proceed with integrating cavalry into the game. And once that is fixed, we can surely start looking into integrating it. We've already, before we promised anything in our roadmap, by the way, we made our research, we made sure that it's possible to do in the game.
Yeah.
And cavalry is one of those things. Like when it comes to animations and everything else, it's already planned out. We know what we need to do. We just need to find the time to do it.
Okay, thanks. That were my questions, so I'm done.
No worries, chaps.
So, Sasse hatte eine Frage.
Yeah. I will start in English and continue in German because I don't know the special words in English. At first, will there are different cartridges for the artillery, like explosive ammunition and the... I don't know how it's called in English.
A canister, yeah. So one of the shots currently is missing in the game. We're thinking of including it before we even have movable artillery as well. Would be canister shot, right?
Yeah.
And you've also seen rockets, which we've also have planned for, and that's something which will be brought into the game most definitely. So yes, you will be seeing multiple artillery shots.
Okay. The second one is about the Prussian uniforms, because the officer you showed off is a mixture of a general, an officer, and a German Landwehr, and there could have been some changes.
Well, there's going to be multiple line infantry units introduced, like we've introduced two, right, for the French faction, two for the British. And there will be two as well for the Prussian, so you can come up to your own judgment with that.
Darf ich kurz was dazu sagen?
Na, bitte.
Wollt ihr was sagen?
Ja, einmal ganz kurz zur Uniform. Das, was du ja gesehen hast, das Graue, das ist ein Reservemantel.
Selbst dann ist er falsch geschneidert.
Ja, na sicher, das ist mir auch aufgefallen. Deswegen habe ich die auch gefragt, was das für ein Infanterieregiment ist, weil mich das total verwirrt hat. Ich denke, aber einmal für alle hier, ich denke mal, das soll Kolberg darstellen, weil der weiße Kragenspiegel und...
Pommern.
Pommern?
Ja.
Aber Kolberg hatte auch diese Hosen bei den Offizieren und wenn du reinzoomst, ist eine 1 auf dem Knopf.
Das heißt, Moment. Die Hosen sind allgemeine Offiziershosen.
Ja.
Die 1 auf dem Knopf heißt nur, dass es Grenadiere sind, und zum Zweiten,
Aber bist du dir ganz sicher, dass es Pommern sein soll?
Ganz sicher. Ich habe da drüben meine Facharbeit geschrieben. Kannst du mir glauben.
Okay, weil
Jungs, wollt ihr diesen Streit später
das ist kein
führen?
Streit, das ist eine Diskussion. Über die Sachen, die ich glaube, alle interessiert, welches Regiment das sein soll.
Das ist das zweite Pommerische. Schulterklasse
Also
rot, zweites Regiment, weißer Kragen ist Pommern.
Okay, gut.
Yeah. So, can I talk to some developers because of the uniforms? Because it will dure longer than half an hour, I think.
So when it comes to the intricate details of uniforms, it's the character designer which takes care of that. I'm not the right chap to talk to, but if you have any questions, just please write them down when it comes to historical accuracy, and I'll forward them to him. He'll definitely, provide counter arguments as he has done so before. We'll also just perhaps post there on the forums within the blog post, and then I'll link him to it once he gets back, because he's currently away for a few days.
Okay.
Das?
Jo, das war's.
Anton hatte eine Frage. Anton zugegen.
Ja. Ich kann jetzt nicht so gut auf Englisch formulieren, also könntest du mir das einfach übersetzen für ihn?
Ja, erzähl doch.
Und zwar, es gibt ja jetzt den Crew- und Regimentsbereich und da wollte ich fragen, ob der vielleicht noch so ausgearbeitet wird, dass man sich da, wenn man ein Regiment hat, dass man da quasi das Regiment gründet und da halt Leute einlädt, die das Spiel auch haben, und wenn die da reinkommen, dass die auf der Map quasi noch mit einem anderen Farbton markiert werden, sodass man sein Regiment in dem LB leichter findet.
Okay, aber ich sag mal so, was den Farbton angeht, du siehst doch eigentlich deine Regimentsmitglieder in der entsprechenden Farbe in Gelb, wenn sie...
Genau, aber das sind ja allgemein die Steam-Freunde und ich meine halt, dass man in-game noch die Funktion hat, dass man ein Regiment halt über diesen Bereich gründet. Derzeit wird man ja einfach in den Thread geleitet. Dass man da halt ein Regiment vielleicht sogar auf der Website öffnet, da halt Leute, die im Forum angemeldet sind, dass man da halt sein Regiment anmeldet und man halt noch so einen dritten Farbton hat, weil im LB da hat man natürlich mehrere gelbe Markierungen, weil es sind ja auch andere Regimenter, die man kennt, da sind dann noch mehr gelbe Punkte und so hätte man halt einen dritten Farbton, dass man halt sein Regiment schneller findet und sich schneller formieren kann.
Das ist nicht ein bisschen, ich sag mal, aufwendig.
So, ja, soll ich das übersetzen?
Ja, übersetze mal.
Alright, so I'm translating for Anton here. Basically, he's asking whether there will be functionality in the future regarding the highlighting of friendly units on the minimap, specifically if you can add internal regiment handling within the game. So you basically invite friends to an internal regiment group inside the game, not from the Steam friends list. And if these people can be displayed in a different color, maybe even with the leading officers. So, in order to facilitate the organization via minimap.
I think that's a really great idea. To be honest, I was eyeing out the possibility of doing that instead of having, huge round banners displayed on everyone's heads, because it also takes a bit away from the immersion. So if regiments are more open to including additional functionality in the minimap, that's definitely the way I would love to go. And when it comes to, let's call this a squad system, right now I was in the process of designing a system which will be worked on in the future for officers. It will be how can I describe this? A non-enforceable squad system. So how it will work is an officer within the game will be able to open up his own squad if he wishes to, and then players within that vicinity will receive a notification that officer will also have functionality to apply a specific number, right? And a preset, TE, ST, and all those other kind of things for that regiment. And then, if you so wish, you can join that regiment or squad for that round specifically. Once that is done, all members within that same squad will have a different icon being displayed within the map, so we can identify which regiment is which, and we will also start providing some slight bonuses for those players to encourage them to play together more, right? This is also functionality that we'd love to do to encourage more team play to occur within public play. And just remember, the class system within Holdfast is not complete yet. There's still some stuff we'd like to give for officers, including perhaps specific bonuses or commands to encourage more people to fire volleys and play within line formations, as well as just give the officer class a better way to direct that squad within the battlefield. It could perhaps, call reinforcements within a specific area, and then you will get a display on the minimap, so you know where the officer stands, and you go to his specific location, and all these kind of things to encourage team play.
Wurde alles verstanden?
Das Nö oder Nein? Ich habe das nicht verstanden.
Das war ein Ja, ja.
Achso, gut.
Thank you.
Ich würde gerne was fragen, eine sehr interessante Frage von einem meiner
User
Leute.
joined your channel.
Reflex?
Yeah?
Will there be a dynamic hitbox system? So when you get hit in the leg, you can move slower, or when you get hit on your aim, so you can't, you're not so effective while aiming, or something like that.
You mean like slowing down a person because he got hit in the legs?
Yes, of course.
I'm not sure if regiments would like that as much or not. I know that it will start creating issues when people are moving in lines, especially. Right? Just imagine someone gets hit from a really far away distance and he's in the middle of the line. Suddenly everyone starts bumping into each other, and it will create some disorganization. So I haven't experimented at all with the idea or how we could implement it, but that's one of the disadvantages I can think of with implementing such a system. I'm not sure what you chaps think about it. I'm always open to feedback, of course.
No, du hattest eine Frage.
Yes, my question is regarding the impending inclusion of more factions like Prussia and possibly other factions as well. Will we see maps in the future where we have multiple factions clash instead of just two sides?
So I think first of all, before we even consider the idea of introducing multiple factions right within the same map, it would be good to see where we can bring that player count up to a level where we say it would be worth it to include that. There's also some technical issues we need to eliminate before we consider introducing multiple factions within the game. It gets a little bit technical, but there's something called VRAM, right, which is very limited for each specific graphic card, and the more classes we load into a match, the more VRAM you will be required for your graphics card to sustain that amount of different uniforms within the map. And unfortunately, from our data, most of our player base don't have what we could even consider medium to high-end PCs. Most of the players have low-end PCs, so we need to make sure that we also cater for them, because we might start introducing features that it will worsen the performance for those players and will alienate them from the game.
Okay. The last small question I had would be some quality of life improvements, but I guess that will be mostly eliminated by receiving the map editor.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, one thing that came to my mind, there were several good questions from the regiment. I do not remember everything, but for example, being able to place targets that would give an actual hit feedback without getting destroyed for shooting practice, simple things. Because big regiments, big organized regiments regularly hold training sessions, which would be something you would not see on the public server. But internally, there would be definitely use for training facilities, tiny things, tiny objects. Is something like that on the radar, or even possible on a small scale?
Yeah, so right now within this map, I think to the right of us, right, there is a small section which is the shooting range. We would also like to include additional functionality to that shooting range, perhaps provide the player with visual feedback when they hit that target, right? That can also be done either to only that specific player or to everyone in the vicinity, depending on what regiments think is best. We can also animate them falling down and then going back up again, so you'll have visual cues of where you're hitting at, right, the target, and all these kind of things. So those are definitely a possibility to do.
Okay. And the last question that is actually relayed to me by Skyman would be, are more types of officer models planned to fit the different units present in the game?
So when it comes to additional officers, what I would like to do is perhaps introduce an officer for the new line infantry units we've introduced. However, before we do that, we need to include the new spawn UI. I'm not sure if you've checked it out, that we've shown in our blog post, since otherwise, if we start integrating them to the existing list, you'll just have multiple classes beneath each other. It will really clutter out the UI, and it's not going to be very handy, especially for new players. So definitely before we can open ourselves to doing more variations to existing classes, be it other line infantry units or even an officer class, we'll have to integrate a new spawn UI first.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
So, dann laden.
Okay, hello. I have a few questions my crew asked me a few times, so I just wanted to ask them. The first question is, will the sails be adjustable by the crew, and when will this be able?
So, when it comes to that mechanic we specifically mentioned, it was our first design document. However, we opted out of it since we figured out it will be too difficult for a bunch of RecTech crewmen to do that, right? Especially if it will fully determine the speed of the ship or not. Just imagine having a crew in a public match, and a bunch of players decide to be insubordinate, as can happen, right? Since obviously each and every player is of a different opinion, and you have a non-moving ship, which is not going to be that fun, right?
Okay.
But I'd like to look into it in the future. I can't promise if it will be a feature before the official full release when it comes to naval combat, and perhaps include some certain functionality where the captain can request, right, an order to the rest of the crew to either raise or lower sail. However, he can also do that just by himself, by issuing that order, but if no one actions upon that order, it will be done slower. So at least that way you won't have to be entirely dependent on the crew, but if the crew is efficient enough, that will be of benefit, right?
Okay.
For the rest of the chaps.
Okay.
If you'd like me to expand a bit upon naval combat, I know right now we have been slightly neglecting when it comes to additional updates, but that's simply because players want us more, like the community wants us more to focus on the army-based content side of things. But an update before 1.0 for naval combat is planned, and it's going to be a substantial update. It's going to include an entire rework of the current game mode, and we'll also be introducing some of the biggest ships in the game.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I definitely look forward to that.
That's good. Another question was asked a few times is when which functionality will the Carpenter have in future, and how long will it take until they will be able to do something? Because at this moment they are just shotgun
class.
Yes, right.
Definitely. Well, within our roadmap, we have also mentioned, like, it's either the Carpenter or the Sappers. We'll see if we should include a separate class or not on land to be able to build, right, player-based defenses. That's something which is still in our roadmap. Apologies for now when I refrain to providing timeframes for things, but the community, when it comes to its own priorities, it does change a lot from time to time. Like, for instance, this new hardcore mode that we've recently included wasn't planned in our roadmap, but we've started receiving a lot of feedback from regiments that they wanted something along those lines to make line battle gameplay more enjoyable. And even though that's not something which will introduce a whole lot of new players to the game, we decided to spend time on it so that we can give back to the great line battle community which is following the game. So hopefully as well you chaps are enjoying that new mode. If you have any feedback on it as well, feel free to provide us with that, by the way.
Okay. Okay, I think that's the last question. No, I just forgot it. Okay, that's all.
No worries, Matthew. You're welcome.
I talk.
Yeah, basically my first question is already answered. It was about the carpenters. Just one more thing about the carpenters. Will it possibly for a carpenter on a ship at the naval battle to repair the ship if it's destroyed or if it's damaged?
Yes. The tricky part about that functionality is going to be how not to make repairing become a chore, right? That's always the tricky part when you include similar functionality, because it might start getting a bit too repetitive for a support class. So we need to either perhaps include a system of how can I describe it, materials, right? So that there's a limited amount or a specific amount of time that you can repair a specific object. This way you don't have to constantly continue repairing something else, because something within the battle, since that's when a feature will become more so of a chore rather than something which is enjoyable, right? So yes, the carpenter is planned to be able to repair naval vessels as well as destroy the artillery pieces, which is one of the slight imbalances we have right now for artillery, because like it gets destroyed, there's no one else who can repair that, and it's usable for the rest of the match. And that's something I'd like to introduce in the game.
Pretty cool. My second question is about self-made uniforms, like in Napoleonic Wars. Will it possible to be to create his own uniform and put it in the game like a mod? Clearly, it won't be it won't be able for everybody to see in a line battle, but maybe it would be cool for the regiments to be themselves in their own uniforms with their own signs.
Definitely, I think something we can we've been discussing previously. Perhaps we'll have some time to do this along with the map editor. I can't promise anything, but we could provide functionality for people to edit textures, right, of existing uniforms, and with that you can do a whole lot. Since, as we know, within the Napoleonic era, sometimes just recoloring an existing uniform could mean an entirely different regiment, right? And hopefully that will be efficient enough for players. Or are you asking specifically functionality as well to introduce your own specific models into the game, as well as different textures?
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
So, dann heute nicht mehr. Laris hatte noch eine Frage, oder?
Kampfi war vor mir dran.
Der Kampfi sagte später, er wollte nicht mehr.
Ich nicht
Achso,
mehr.
also ja.
Gut. Alles gut.
Vielleicht, Snow, du hast eben so schön Englisch gesprochen, kannst du für mich übersetzen, dann muss ich die englische Sprache nicht so verschandeln.
Ja, klar.
Und zwar einmal, was mir einfiel, ich bin relativ oft als Admin in den Line Battles unterwegs, und was mir aufgefallen ist, dass im Spec-Mode mit der Freecam, ob es da möglich ist, quasi, wenn man dann die linke Maustaste klickt, dass man dann zu einem Spieler hinzoomt. Also wieder random wie beim normalen Spectaten, dass du quasi so durchklicken kannst, aber trotzdem dann noch die Free-Camera nutzen kannst, ohne erst wieder ins Spawn-Menü zu gehen, dann wieder umzustellen und dann wieder alles neu suchen zu müssen.
Ja, verstehe, was du meinst. Okay. So, Laris has a question about functionality regarding the free roaming camera, and he asked if it would be possible to have a seamless progression between the free roaming camera and the personal camera. Namely, if you would, for example, left click while you're specifically looking at a soldier, if you can snap the camera to that person, to that player, and get back out to the free roam camera without having to go to the menu every single time.
Yes, definitely. It's been a requested feature as well, and we'd love to do it as a quality of life feature. Right now, by the way, when it comes to the administration of events, we've included a feature recently which you can find in the game options, right? It's called Show Player Names under Free Row Camera. If you enable that, it will always show the names of other players in the battlefield. So you'll have an easier time figuring out where an existing line is when you're navigating with the free roam camera. Hopefully that should already make life a little bit easier for administrators.
Okay. Noch eine, und zwar, was mir auffiel am Scoreboard. Zum einen kann man nicht scrollen, fiel mir auf. Was halt, wenn du gerade so große Line-Battles hast mit 60 Leuten auf jeder Seite, hast du da echt ein Problem, wenn du mal durchscrollen willst, kurz. Und ob es möglich ist, da dann auch einzubauen, wie viele von jeder Seite leben, tot sind und insgesamt da sind. Im Moment steht ja immer nur, wie viele insgesamt da sind. Und um dann so einen groben Überblick zu haben, wie viel leben noch und wie viel sind tot. Ne? Du kennst diese Aufteilung, glaube ich, noch.
Ja, genau. So, another quality of life improvement regarding the scoreboard, namely the ability to actually scroll the list, which is currently impossible, and regarding the fact that we do have servers online with sometimes over 160, 180 people, scrolling is a must because you cannot see all the players on the list.
Definitely.
And also the inclusion of the numbers of how many people are dead and how many are still alive on each side, because only the total number currently gets shown.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so those are both things which we have planned in the roadmap, including scrolling functionality and the number of players left alive specifically for the assault game mode. So that's that.
Okay, letzte Frage, die mir noch einfiel. Das Ablegen von Waffen. Ob das geplant ist, implementiert wird, wie auch immer. Gerade bezüglich jetzt, ne, wenn jemand stirbt, dass die Waffe dann da liegt und man sie aufheben kann. Ob jetzt die Munition direkt dabei ist oder nicht, ist ja mal irrelevant erstmal. Aber ja, unsere Offiziere beschweren sich immer, dass sie nur mit Pistole schießen können und nicht mit Muskete. Deswegen wäre das noch so eine Frage, quasi dieses Ablegen bzw. Fallen lassen von Waffen und das Aufnehmen davon.
Okay, Moment. Wird, glaube ich, ein bisschen umschweifender. So the next question is regarding functionality to actually discard and pick up leftover weapons from the battlefield, which I believe would also tie into maybe getting different loadouts depending on the unit, maybe not completely differently classed weapons, which would break the immersion, but different equipment possible, and also pick up in the battlefield. For example, currently there is no possibility to actually resupply soldiers with ammunition.
That's true. That's a very fair point. Regarding the the introduction of having a preset selection of weapons that you can choose from before spawning, that is definitely possible, and it will not impact performance at all. However, if we start introducing pickable weapons from the game, that would mean you will have more additional objects within the battlefield, and that will start impacting performance. Unfortunately for users, it's just how games work, right? The more objects you have in the game, the more performance hungry it is going to be, and those objects will also have to remain singular in terms of technical terminology, so that would mean more of an impact within the battlefield. Perhaps instead of introducing pickable weapons, something which wouldn't impact performance, right? If the case is that the problem right now, for instance, within the hardcore mode, we have only a set number of 20 shots that each regiment can fire specific for the rifleman and 25 for the line. We could either introduce a cart or a class. We could also assign this functionality to the sappers or carpenters, which would allow them to carry ammo boxes. Perhaps they can do so slowly, and then those players can interact with that ammo box and replenish their supplies. We could also set a limit on that supply box if we want to. So that would be another way to kind of tackle the issue of being without ammo, right, while still being alive in the battlefield, and then replenish it, and you can continue fighting on that way without impacting performance.
Okay, so different weapons planned, pick up weapons not planned, supply definite possibility.
Yes, well, once again, as we said, we can always introduce this kind of things to the game, but I'd love for the players to know the implications if we do such a thing, right? So I won't say like, look, we definitely won't do it. If there's a huge demand for something, yes, we'll do it, but the implication will be that it's going to be performance hungry, and that may also either indirectly affect the amount of players we can support in the future for each and every server, and all these kind of things.
Okay, thanks. I'm done again.
No worries.
I think it's my turn again.
Jo, Entschuldigung.
Okay. Darf ich dann oder?
Ich weiß nicht.
Also, I think there's if Joe at next.
So, okay, tut mir leid, ich melde mich wieder.
First of all, there's a small question regarding admin commands. Is there an option to add in some menu to make it a bit easier to administrate some servers? That's one of the questions that the regiment asked.
Yes, so could you perhaps define some more specific functionality as to what you would like within the existing admin panel?
I have to be honest here, I'm not really an admin, but it's one of the questions I was asked to ask you, but it's like a visual menu, I guess, more or less. So it's not like coding, it's a bit more easier menu to understand, I guess.
When it comes to the administration of servers, like right now, how it works is first you set up the map rotation that you want from the config file, right? And then after you do that, you can pretty much neglect using the F1 console in the game except for logging in or a broadcast message, which we can also do in UI form if players wish for it. And then just press the vPanel, and you have most of the administration tools you need when it comes to player-specific administration. Now, if someone's looking at integrating a system which would also allow you, for instance, to change the map or to a specific game mode or change to the time of day within those within that UI, it's possible. Yes, it will require some work, of course, because that's more functionality, including UI design and how to make it easy for administrators to do all these kind of things. I'm not sure if it would be a good idea though to focus on those kind of things now. It really depends on the feedback from administrators, because just remember, if we start focusing on one thing when it comes to like additional administration functionality, that's a programmer's job. So it will take away from, in my point of view, other important matters we have for the game, like either just introducing new content, improving upon melee combat, or introducing cavalry, sappers, or all those kind of things we've been discussing here, right?
So, thank you for answering that question. I do still have some more. One of the questions would be possible, as you said, you're planning to maybe add in some player-generated content. Would it might be possible to edit the textures of the flags, so a regiment can have their own flags and carry it into battle?
Yes, that should be possible as well. I don't see... I'm not sure if we'll face any technical hurdles, but that does sound possible indeed.
Okay, thank you. And another question would be if it would be possible to maybe introduce marching. So this way, I mean, like with the musicians, you can all sing in on the same song, like that for infantry, so everyone can walk in the same step, basically. To maybe generate some kind of sound would be even beneficial for some parades.
Yes, like march to the beat and all these kind of things. That's something I'll have to discuss with the programmer if it's possible or not. It's definitely not something which we have to enforce, however. Like sometimes we get to suggestions for either enforcing marching to the beat, but if that's being enforced, then what are we going to do exactly? Like, control of your character will then have to be left either to a single person to control. It's going to be quite a tricky feature to implement, most definitely, without making it feel like someone is driving a vehicle for all the other players.
Okay, that was a very good answer to that. And then the last question, or not actually the last question, is another one from our regiment. Is there are there any more animations planned, like new ones, a rework, or the animations are not final yet, right?
No, the animations are not final. If you have some specific feedback on which animations you dislike or perhaps you think could be better, then definitely talk to us about that. We'll see what we can do.
Okay, so animations are not final. So the animation on, for example, right now are all good. What? Is someone else just writing me some questions right here? I'm a little bit confused. But another thing, another animation like for gestures, maybe something like present the gun. You know?
Yes. Like on maybe just specific roleplay, other animations, either it's rendering, right, or cheering, or all this kind of stuff. I would really love to include something like that in the game. I think one of the greatest things, especially about public servers, is the interaction that goes on within the community and all those role-playing possibilities and some hilarious moments, of course. I know not everyone always takes the game seriously, and I do enjoy that part of the game. So yes, rendering most definitely a feature I'd love to include, and then we'll see what other role-playing features to do as well.
Okay, so my last question, finally, would be, will there be a unit of NCOs? So it's not only the officer, but also like the NCO role.
Yes, this is another question we've been asked a lot. When it comes to NCOs, I'd love to include that as a class. I cannot promise it for before 1.0 though, but it's a definite idea for something after we officially release the game.
Okay, thank you very much for taking your time and answering all these questions.
No worries.
So, Anton hatte noch eine Frage.
I wanted to ask about the character. Can you customize it, or is something planned like that?
So yes, again, character customization. Some previous points I made were regarding optimizations, right? If we introduce character customization in the game, that's going to be more difficult for us to optimize and introduce as many players as possible that we can per server. Just so you know, right now the game can support 150 players, yes, but it doesn't mean we cannot optimize the game to support more players. As you know, we don't really promise any player count whatsoever, but that's because sometimes players' expectations are too high or they might be too low. So one thing though that I can promise you and tell you is that there's much more that we can do when it comes to optimization, and this will also have an intricate effect on supporting more players per server. How the game is designed as well, the better the hardware becomes, right? The more players will be able to support per server. If suddenly, let's say, like on the client side, the standard of a specific amount of hardware becomes much higher and much bigger, then we'll be able to increasingly introduce more players into the game without us having to do additional optimization. However, as I've said before, there's also much more work we can do from our side to be able to introduce more players into the game.
Okay. Another question I have is the HUD. So, is there the possibility that the player can, customize his HUD? Like, if I wanted the map on the right side and the chat upside right, or something like that, or I don't want the map like this, so I see more of the screen. Is that possible?
Right now, if you want to toggle off specific elements from the UI, there's an option for that already. If you go to Game, Options, Game, and under User Interface, you have a huge list of things you can toggle off, including minimap, broadcast messages, spectating text, personal score, and I think there should be almost all of the things within the game.
Okay, I didn't see that.
With the scroll lock key, you can also toggle on and off, right? It's just a press of a button, the entirety of the UI, so that's very, very handy for taking screenshots, or if you're in free roam, right, you want less clutter and all these kind of things. When it comes to perhaps having specific presets of user interfaces positioned differently, that's something which would require quite a lot of work, but it would be possible to do.
Yeah, that's all I want to ask.
Das oder habe ich jetzt gehört? Wo waren wir jetzt bei?
Anton, also ich glaube ich jetzt.
Soldaten hat noch.
Okay. One thing I wanted to add is that someone, I don't know who, but he said that he wants something like a hit marker. I think that it would be very helpful also for the cannons on sea. That's just the thing I wanted to add there. But one big question is what are you going to do with the moderator of the German forum in the future?
Yes. So the first question regarding hit markers for artillery pieces, you are referring to like perhaps a score you could obtain, right, by hitting either a ship or all these kind of things. That's something which, yes, right now it's missing from the game, but it's planned, especially for the naval combat game mode. When it comes to the German moderator, as I've been talking to our current existing community, right, I've been talking to Ben previously to see if he was still up for the task or not, and he said he didn't have the time. So now that it's over, then I believe I was talking to Corazon as well, and I told him that I'll be taking care of finding another moderator before we introduce Prussia into the game. So that's something I would like to take care of pretty soon. Now, in all honesty, when it comes to the situation within the German community, I am not well aware, like, you know, with all the current intricacies as to how best to proceed with enlisting a moderator within the forums. Is that fellow that I enlist, I want to make sure that there is no, first of all, drama involved, which is an unfortunate thing that happens sometimes, and second of all, that moderator remains impartial throughout his decisions and unbiased relative of the rule. There's also some other specific rules that we have, including not being involved or discussing politics, right, within the community, which is something we are very adamant about. And once we have all those requirements, we can proceed with having a language moderator within that forum section. If you would like to recommend someone which you think would be ideal, then please do send me a PM. I will consider all options. Then I will talk to the existing language moderators and global moderators of the forum, and then we'll decide upon
the
upcoming moderator.
Is there already someone who you are thinking of?
Right now, no. But there's been suggestions, right, for which are currently in our board. Of course, I think you know who those people are, right? Which have been already going around and people coming to me, you know, saying that I think this person would be good, or this one would be good. And the more recommendations I see from those players, then I will finally gather the opinion from the existing moderators that we have on the forums, and then we'll come up with that decision.
Okay, because I started a thread that the German community needs a new moderator, and Ben said that he already said that he said to you who he wants, which moderator he wants.
If you're talking about a post Ben made, unfortunately, if it's on the forums or if it's in the German board, I haven't seen it yet. So I'll definitely take a look at what he's been saying and consider his opinions as well. Another option that we have is if players think it would be best to have 2 moderators instead of 1, I'm definitely up for that as well.
Okay, then my last question is if there's gonna be something like in Mountain Blade this AI for like, I don't know, role plays or something like that, because I think in many situations that would be very helpful to have AI.
I think it would definitely be a lovely feature, right? To
User
include
disconnected
AI,
from your
or
channel.
perhaps something similar to what we're used to Commander Battle Game Mode. However, it is quite a lot of work, right? Right now, definitely something I can say is that our focus is on the multiplayer side of things, without the existence of AI. But I will not exclude me also as a personal preference experimenting with UI and introducing something similar with AI as a game mode as well in the game.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
No worries.
Elzen hatte noch eine Frage.
Ja, vielleicht kann Snowdrake ja für mich übersetzen. Muss ich euch überhaupt nicht vergewaltigen. Also meine Frage ist, warte, lasst mich mal sehen. Das Einheitenlimit, ob das in Zukunft irgendwie abstellbar ist oder wenn wir einfach...
Du meinst gegenüber den Klassenlimitierungen?
Ja, also zum Beispiel auch, dass man auf Landgefechten einfach irgendwie Kapitän oder sowas hat.
Wurde schon halbwegs beantwortet. Es wurde gesagt, dass eine Konfiguration reingebracht wird, dass auf jedem Server und auf jeder Karte soll jeder seine eigene Limitierung reinstellen.
Ach so,
ich gehe mal davon aus, dass du zum Beispiel dann auch einen Server mit zum Beispiel 30 Schützen stellen kannst.
Okay, gut.
Es sollte in die Server-Configs rein, hat er gesagt. Also quasi, du kannst in der Server-Config, so wie du die Maps anpassen kannst, oder zum Beispiel bei den Seemaps anpassen kannst, wie viele Schiffe spawnen und was für Schiffe spawnen, kannst du dann einstellen, wie viel wovon spawnen können. Das hat er gesagt. Ich habe mir das extra aufgeschrieben.
Ach so, na, ich habe nicht ganz verstanden.
Ja, kein Thema.
Warte, Ifio, noch eine Frage?
Yeah. So now to my very last question. I actually forgotten this one. Is I want to already ask about UI changes. I have another suggestion or like question if that's planned. Maybe would there be an option to change the color of the crosshairs? Because sometimes it's very difficult to see where you're aiming.
Yes. Definitely. Especially if you're like in a snow-themed environments, right? It's a little bit difficult for the crosshair. Yes, an option to change colors for the crosshair.
Nice. Thank you once again.
No worries.
Okay, so before you run out of time, we're just gonna show in some of the questions that the people on the stream have that are watching this. So, questions include, for example, will there be dynamic damage, meaning on players, if people are wounded?
Habe ich schon gefragt.
Hast du schon gefragt? Okay. Will there be, Meuterei hast du auch gefragt?
Nein.
Okay. Will there be a possibility to mutiny, for example, on a ship, if there's a captain on a ship and he's just sitting in a spot?
Yes, a very good idea. Yeah, those are a few things we have planned and we'd like to bring in along with the naval update. Sometimes there's a little bit of an issue with players, either someone driving a ship off into the distance and you can't really do much about it. So
there's a different question here regarding a vote kick, which I guess it would be like mutiny, so it would fall under the same category. If there are people that can get voted out of a server which are disrupting or blasting music, for example.
I think like the thing is, we could do a similar functionality, but you can also see that becoming very abusable. Right? Unfortunately, sometimes you might also just get players congregating against someone who has done nothing wrong within the server. They start vote kicking this fellow. Everyone presses yes just for the hilarity, and the player's kicked out of the server, and it's not really that nice of an experience for the players. Other options that I prefer is to provide easier methods, right? For the specific player to ignore someone else in the server who doesn't want to, like we've done with the VoIP round players list. Now I know sometimes it might be slightly too tedious to scroll down through all those players, but something else I'd like to include in the game, like for instance, is a filter, which would display all of the current players speaking near your vicinity instead of the entire player list. It will make it much more easier to mute someone else in the server. We can also include client-side functionality to mute someone from the chat if someone is spamming chat or something, right? Obviously, you can always report these guys on Discord, like if someone is just it's not acting according to the server rules, please inform our administrators on there, and our admins will be there and take the action accordingly. However, until they do so, you can either mute them to VoIP and all the other stuff.
Okay, then so we don't drag this out for too long, one last one from Plasma. Here's questions according to ammunition. How realistically will it be handled in the future? Will there, for example, be a hardcore mode for hardcore realism, meaning that, for example, you stand in water, or I don't know if elements are planned like rain, for example, if you have a chance to misfire if your ammunition, if your powder gets wet?
Let's see, so once again, the question of misfires is also a subject which is brought up very often. However, one question that I always pose is that, is it really something that players would look forward to? Just imagine firing your weapon. It doesn't fire just because it doesn't, out of a random number. Isn't that just going to piss you off? More so than anything. It's something I'd like to gather more feedback before we even consider doing a server-side functionality to enable misfires or not within the game.
It would be technically a good thing to force close combat maps, so that's one thing.
If we'd like to force closer range engagements, I think there's other options we can do without having misfires, because remember, misfires would inherently be random, right? And when you have something which is very random, it's also very difficult to judge if that's going to occur or not occur, and as to at what number or at what place or at what time is it going to occur, right? It's random. It's, as I said, I don't object to having misfires in the game, but if it is introduced, it will have to be a toggleable option directly from the server, and I won't be introducing similar functionality on public servers.
User left your channel.
Okay,
Okay,
so
sollen wir dann Trommelwirbel gleich machen?
depends on how much time you have. I'm pretty much done. If anyone else
Ich
has
habe noch
any
eine
last
Frage.
questions.
I can answer a few questions if you don't.
Also
Okay.
ich habe noch eine, wenn das geht.
Yeah.
Von dem.
User was moved to your channel.
Refleax, one of my oldest members, asked if you're working on a conquest mode, so like you're holding the point and get every 10 seconds points, like for, and when you hold it, you win. When you.
All right, let me just say something, right? We may or may not have something similar planned for the next update.
Okay. Ich habe auch nichts mehr. Falls jetzt noch Werte noch.
If
Das
it's,
sagt er,
if
glaube
it's
ich, noch.
tiny questions, one guy was asking in the stream whether we would get a symbol over some guy's head for the medic if they are wounded instead of the health bar.
I think that would be a nicer way of displaying things, yes. Perhaps you could just have a cross, right, which replicates the health of a player instead. And it would fill up or down depending on the amount of health that that player still has instead of those bars, right? It's just a different way of displaying things with it looking nicer. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And the usual questions, what kind of upgrades or improvements are planned for close combat, if you have anything specific in mind, and will riflemen be nerfed in the future?
So yeah, riflemen,
the usual
of course,
questions,
the bane of the battlefield, indeed. When it comes to riflemen, we did reduce their number from 10 to 6. Right now it's just a slight precautionary measure. I know unfortunately that it did impact some rifle regiments in the game, especially for organized play, but that's when when we will introduce functionality for administrators to have their own specific classes in the game that will solve their entire problem. So an event can be hosted with whatever classes you want. If you want to have 20 riflemen in the battlefield, you can do so. When it comes to nerfing riflemen, both within the casual, or let's call it the standard, right, and hardcore game modes. The hardcore game mode, I will need to gather more feedback if players would like them, if regiments would like them to be nerfed even further. But for the standard game mode, yes, they will also be nerfed more so than they are now. One thing I'd definitely like to introduce to have that nerf applicable is
Okay, Flo?
Ja, was ist?
Okay, so laden.
Der hat Sasse noch eine Frage
User
gehabt.
disconnected from your channel.
Ja, zum einen habe ich nicht ganz verstanden, ob jetzt Fehlzündungen kommen oder nicht.
Was kommt?
Fehlzündungen.
Nein.
Nein, und wenn
Fehlzündungen
sie
kommen
kommen, dann als reines Feature für private Server.
Alles klar. The second question was where
User was
exactly I
moved
have
to
to
your
ask because of the uniforms. Have I to go to the Discord channel or where?
To ask what? Sorry, the uniforms.
Because of I've got some improvements for the uniforms because they're not really historic for the Prussians, and where I have to speak with somebody about that.
So give me a moment. Let me link you to Ethernet.
Okay.
Let's see. Suggestions and feedback. So if you'd like, you can create a thread there, right? Title it whatever you want, provide your own arguments, and then you could either message me on Discord saying that you've completed the thread, and I will direct it to Jackson once he gets back. Hopefully he'll find some time to answer all of your questions as well.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
I'm going to post that thread also in the stream for everyone watching.
Yes, it's a forum section, by the way, where to provide suggestions and feedback for the game. We do read this. We don't respond to each and every thread, of course, but it's the place to go to if you'd like to suggest something for the game or just something we could be doing better and all these kind of things.
Yeah. And will grenades ever be a thing?
That's a question we posed in one of the blog posts. I believe it was along with the huge update, right? We've said like we didn't, introduce grenades with the grenadier class because we know it's not really historically accurate, right? Grenades did exist before the Napoleonic Wars, but they've become obsolete with grenadiers, right? Within the Napoleonic era, so they weren't really much more of a thing. And if the community would really like us to introduce grenades into the game, we would. And there's also a lot of things we can do to make sure that they are not overpowered, even when it comes for line or organized gameplay. And I've listed some arguments there within that blog post, which if you give me some time I can link you to it, that specifically describe some of our ideas on grenades if we ever introduce them to the game. And before we do so, by the way, we will pose a poll to the community and you will decide if you would want grenades or not, ultimately. We also have the option to just introduce grenades in naval combat scenarios, which, to my knowledge, yes, they were also used during the Napoleonic era. Give me a moment to link you the thread, by the way.
Sonst noch Fragen, so generell?
Ja, ich habe noch
So
etwas.
this thread on TeamSpeak, right? If you read through this blog post under the Grenadier section where we've introduced the class, there's also a paragraph which specifically describes more things about grenades. You can just read through that, say what you think, voice your opinion on it, and then once we start, once we're thinking of introducing grenades into the game, as I said, we will post it in a poll. And if the community votes against having grenades, then we will not include them in the game.
So darf ich?
Ja, bitte. Aber die letzte
Okay.
dann, also wir sind schon
Yes.
über der Zeit.
One really little thing I wanted to add is that Sackpfeifer isn't the best translation for bagpiper.
Oh, for the German translation?
Yes, yes. It's,
Yes. If you notice some mistakes within the translation, just remember like these were all done by the community, and there was a lot of text. So some mistakes, even hilarious ones, sometimes, right?
Yes.
Just message me on Discord if you can, and
Okay, alright.
divide it and we'll fix it. Don't worry.
Okay, alright. Thank you.
No worries.
So, ich glaube, das war's von Fragen her, oder? So, Entwickler. Da kommen jetzt noch was auf, weil Reflex, what is with your time?
I can answer 2 more questions. Let's just do that.
Und wenn jemand noch was hat, dann raus damit.
Okay, how many people will be required to man one of the bigger vessels you will introduce to the naval combat?
Yes, well, have you seen our developer blog post? You know, that those really huge vessels, right, that we've shown there? And that will require at the very least 30 men, if you'd like to man all sides, all guns, right?
How much? I don't understood.
30 men.
30, okay.
Yes, 30. At the very least 30.
Dann das wird den Fragen hier jetzt schließen, wenn da keiner was gegen hat. So, Reflex, no more questions for today.
Well, it's been fun, chaps. As always, like if you have any other questions, please do just either message me on Discord. Unfortunately, sometimes my Steam friend list does get quite full, so I can't accept everyone. But my Discord is always unlimited, so just message me on there if you'd like, and I'll definitely respond to anything you have to say. It's been very fun, by the way. And thanks for doing this meeting.
No problem. Wie sieht's aus? Hat noch jemand irgendwas anzubringen, was sich speziell jetzt auf die deutsche Community bezieht? Weiß nicht, eine Zusammenarbeit und so weiter. Wie würde da jetzt zum Beispiel die Regimentsliga vom 5 in den Sinn kommen?
Ja, das wollte ich auch gerade ansprechen. Es war ja mal Diskussion hier gewesen, sollte eine Liga eingeführt werden, was ist daraus geworden und
also wir sind derzeit gerade dabei, die Spieltage für die Liga zu planen.
Neben den Teil, also es sollte sich ja schon lohnen. Also wenn da jetzt 2 Regimenter sind, ist ein bisschen
Ja,
mau.
wir sind jetzt 5, wenn ich mich nicht irre, ne? Ja.
Okay. Ich denke, dass ihr Nummer 8, ich dann 10 Mann werden auf jeden Fall stellen können. Dann werden wir mal schauen, dass wir uns da auch mal was zusammenstellen. Wie sieht das aus? Darf man nur mit einem Team kommen oder darf da auch mehr angemeldet werden? Sage ich jetzt Team 1, Team 2?
Ihr könntet da mehrere Teams draus machen, allerdings müsstet ihr uns dann mitteilen, wer in welchem Team ist, damit
Ja,
ihr
natürlich,
quasi die Spieler einmal durchtaucht.
Ja, nee, dann würdet ihr ja dementsprechend eine Liste bekommen.
Ja.
Sonst noch Sachen, weiß ich nicht. Liniengefecht, ob man mit der Community irgendwie einen Kurs einschlagen möchte in irgendeine Richtung. Irgendwie sowas.
Ja, mir wundert es, dass Ben Moderator in der deutschen Community ist. Weil er doch mit,
Da haben wir doch schon lang und breit drüber. Ja, Ben hat sich ja ehemalig mal für Holdfast stark gemacht und hat sich dann wieder in NW zurückgezogen, nachdem er gesagt hat, das wird nicht funktionieren. Auf jeden Fall danke für die Unterstützung, sage ich nur. Daher, er hat das erst unterstützt, aber dann einfach irgendwie fallen gelassen.
Ich habe dazu auch einen Thread veröffentlicht, den Refleax auch kommentiert hat. Und ich habe das ihn auch gerade eben gefragt und er hat auch gesagt, dass er sich noch vor dem Preußen-Update darum kümmern wird. Also von daher kann man, glaube ich, sagen, dass es im Forum bald einen neuen Moderator geben wird. Ja, schon gesagt.
Reflex, do you have any questions for us?
Well, what can I pose, right? Questions, no, not really, but as I've said, it's been really nice, right? Seeing all these organizations take place. It's something which we definitely enjoy, and we do hope to see the German community grow more. Hopefully, the translations, even if some lines have been hilariously translated, should be, more of an encouragement to introduce more good German folk into the game. And if you do have any suggestions for us on how we can encourage more of the community to opt into the game and keep it on and growing, then please do, definitely forward those to us.
Well, I have one last question about something else.
Go ahead.
Will we probably get some roleplay classes, like in the end, it's maybe a feature for the future, but like nurses or civilians that we could play in certain private server maps?
Great question.
Yeah, that's true. Like as I said, I do very enjoy the role-playing aspect of the game. I think it's great, especially on public servers as well. There's also something in our roadmap which I've written about, like for instance, it could also be a role-playing oriented game modes, right? That's perhaps a good idea that someone comes up with within the community, and we could definitely work on that. It could also include some additional role-playing classes as civilians or perhaps, priests, and all those kind of things, just to make everything look.
I would like to see peasant infantry with farmer equipment, or like the partisans in Mounted Blade.
Militia, essentially.
Yeah, militia.
Yes. Militias could also be another class, definitely introduced into the game and applicable for most factions as well. And also, like something else for roleplay we'd like to do is even on these maps, the training maps, to include the ability for players to spawn with all existing factions. So we'll be able to spawn with like all the existing classes, including naval and coastal ones. Hopefully that will open more options for roleplay as well.
Will we see special classes for artillery? So you need a class for.
Oh yes. Well, artillery, like a specific artillery class, is also an interesting question. Right now, how Holdfast is designed, whenever we design something, we try to not enforce someone specifically to a particular role, and he always has to do that, like regardless of what he wants to do. Just remember, like, let's imagine if we limit functionality for artillery pieces to just 3 artillerymen, and then two of those 3 artillerymen decide to not use the artillery at all, right? They can do that. There's no way you can enforce them. Then you'll be at a significant disadvantage, just because those players are not playing their intended role of their class. So before we introduce a specific artillery class within the game, there needs to be some intricate mechanics which would also allow players which are not of that role to use those artillery pieces, but the artillery class will have much more of an advantage with using that artillery piece, and it will also have a priority over using those artillery pieces.
Okay.
So maybe a more personal question. What is your current favorite project inside the game?
So right now, my current favorite project, I'd say something I'm really looking forward to is the map editor, right? I still remember with the other game, like I really enjoyed when we hosted the map contest competition, and it's really nice to see what players come up with when you provide them, like, with the tools and freedom to do what they want, and that's something I am really looking forward to, definitely. And I'd also like to host competitions relatively soon after we introduce that map editor into the game, and then we could consider picking some of those best maps and introduce them as official ones.
Yeah. So may we also see some integration into Steam works in the future?
Yes, that's planned. That will come with the map editor. Steam works integration.
How many? For Prussia, I saw the Prussian Jägers, the officers, the guard, and the line. How many uniforms are left to make?
Let's see. So, I think if I start counting, I might start giving away some of the things we have planned as well for the faction. So if you will excuse me, I won't be divulging that information for now until further notice. I just like to leave some things as a surprise.
Are you working on the 2nd Infantry at the moment?
Not right now. It's another class which we're working on.
Wollen wir den Kreis dann schließen oder noch was?
Er hat keine mehr
Hast du was zum
Fragen.
Abschluss geplant, Kurzer?
Ich würde das nochmal von meiner Mannschaft und von, wenn ihr wollt, zum Salut anlegen lassen, aber sonst nicht, ne?
Das fände ich auch schön.
Ich hätte sonst immer eine kleine Frage sonst.
Super, okay. Jetzt irgendwie schon so ein bisschen bereit. So, jetzt bitte, noch die Frage.
Okay, my very last question now is, I hope it hasn't been answered before. When you say with the Prussians, you know, when you add them to the game, are you going just to make them playable on the new maps, or are they going to be selectable like in the server settings, so we can actually play on, like as the Prussians on Sharpen, for example?
Yeah, so that's something which will be introducing right along with the Prussians. There needs to be a little bit of a rework to the spawn system, but you will be able to select, for instance, right, you want the British, let's call it at spawn A, at spawn start A, or the French at spawn start B, or you want to play against, you know, British against Prussia, or well, whatever you want. Alright, if you have the Prussians against the Brits, if you'd like to as well. Historically inaccurate, I know, but you'll be able to have the freedom to do whatever you want within the config files. And that will come along with the introduction of the Prussians.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you. Once again for answering my last question here.
Wird dann doch jetzt aufhören. Neigt sich langsam dem Ende. Ich habe schließlich gar noch ein Gefecht zu schlagen. So, ich glaube, jetzt können wir, oder?
Ja, ich hätte ja noch mal kurz was, ne? Habe ich ja
Ach
gesagt.
nee, hören wir auf.
Ist ja aber keine Frage an den Entwickler, also heute rum.
Ja, genau, stimmt. Da war ja was.
Also an die hier anwesenden Herren, ich hätte eine Frage, nämlich um 20 Uhr machen wir ein kleines Liniengefecht. Hätte jemand Lust da mitzumachen?
Ich bin gleich bei Public RB, von daher.
Tu schon wieder.
Ja, mir wurde bestätigt, dass das besser ist als der Scheiß, der sich in der englischen Community rumtreibt. Deswegen habe ich mir gedacht, gut, dann nochmal teil.
Also hat keiner Lust von euch? Okay, nehme ich so zur Kenntnis.
Ja, müssen wir leider ablehnen.
Wir haben selbst ein Event melden, sorry.
Dann würde ich, wenn jetzt wirklich nichts mehr ist, das erste Treffen, was wir hier gehabt haben, für beendet erklären.
Dann mach's doch einfach.
Ja, hab ich doch
Jetzt
gerade.
kommt nichts mehr.
Hab ich doch.
Es war mir so wie eine Frage formuliert.
Nee, ich hab gesagt, ich hab's für beendet erklären, mein Gott.
Haben wir toll gemacht.
Sehr schön. War schön mit euch.
Jo.
So, Kampfi, Tuba, komm mal mit, wir gehen jetzt weg.
Dann wünsche ich noch allen viel Spaß.
Können wir noch ein ordentliches Feuer machen? Also so in den Himmel, so bam?
Ja, wenn alle mitmachen.
Wenn alle mitmachen, natürlich.
Ja, gut.
Komplett alle anwesend.
Und dann macht so jemand einen Screenshot und lädt den hoch, einfach so im Holdfast Forum.
Ja, hier, da hinten wird nicht angelegt.
Okay, dann bitte ich alle anzulegen. Ganz nach oben, würde ich sagen, bis zum Anschlag. Ganz einfach nach oben ziehen.
Das sieht scheiße aus.
Ist egal, ja, ganz nach oben. Feuer! Wunderbar, ich danke Ihnen allen.
Wünsche ich allen noch einen schönen Abend und auf jeden Fall.
Danke, ebenfalls an alle.
So, dann wünsche ich den Herren noch einen schönen Abend. Danke an alle. Und ich bin abgestürzt.
Alter! Ja, verplaten, wo ist denn noch alles?
Sehr schön planen.
Das war wieder klar, ne? Weißt du, ich dachte,
wo ist das
Mannschaft stellt's an, aber dann seid ihr das, ne? Schlimm.
Ja, Gott, jetzt geht das ganz los.
Ich bin nur wegen dem Bier gekommen. Schönen Abend noch.
Ja gut, der Johannes Moskau verabschiedet sich dann schon ab.
Ich habe einen Moskitier umgebracht.
Das ist so genau deswegen seid ihr nicht in unserem Line-Battle.
Disconnected from your channel.